Let's get started on counting rhythms number 3. In this one, we are being introduced to counting eighth notes. Eighth notes are our new notes for counting here. We also have quarter notes, quarter rests, half notes, and half rests as well. Let's remember that each of these are in 4/4 time, and so we need to count to 4 for each of these bars. Let's start out with the first one. An eighth note gets half a beat, which means we can divide it up by the first one, which is all divided up into eighth notes. We can go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So each eighth note gets either a number or an and sign. So it's divided up equally like that. For our second one, we have 2 eighth notes to start out. So that gets 1 and. Now our next note is a quarter note, which gets a whole beat. So we write 2 and underneath that quarter note. Next one is a quarter note, which also gets a whole beat. So we write 3 and under there. And our next quarter note gets the 4 and. Let's move on to our third exercise here. We have a quarter note, then 2 eighth notes, then a quarter note, and another quarter note. For our first quarter note, we get 1 and. Then the 2 eighth notes, you get a 2 under the first one, and an and under the second one, and then 3 and then 4 and. Okay, line 2 here. We have 2 quarter notes, 2 eighth notes, and then another quarter note. For our first quarter note, we have 1 and. Second quarter note, 2 and. Then our 2 eighth notes, the 3 goes under the first eighth notes, and the and goes under the second eighth note. And then for our last quarter note, we write 4 and. For our next one here, we have 4 eighth notes, then a quarter note, and another quarter note. So for our eighth notes, we write 1 and, 2 and then for our quarter note, we have 3 and our next quarter note, 4 and. For our next sheet here, we have a whole bunch of eighth notes, 6 of them, and then 1 quarter note. So here it's going to be much like the first one that we did. So 1 and 2 and 3 and then our last quarter note gets the 4 and, a whole beat there. Third line. On our third line, we have quarter rests are our new thing. So we have a quarter note, then a quarter rest, another quarter rest, and then 2 eighth notes. So for a quarter note, we write 1 and, gets a whole beat. Quarter rest gets 2 and. Our next quarter rest gets 3 and then our eighth notes, you get the 4 under the first eighth note and the and under the second. Okay, for our next one, we have 2 eighth notes, a quarter rest, and then another 2 eighth notes, and another quarter rest. So under our first eighth note, we write 1 and. Our first quarter note gets 2 and. Our next eighth notes get 3 and then our last quarter note gets 4 and. On our next one, it's just the opposite of the last one. So we start out, we have a quarter rest, 2 eighth notes, another quarter rest, and then 2 eighth notes. So for this one, we write 1 and under the first quarter rest, and then 2 and underneath the 2 eighth notes. Our next quarter rest gets 3 and then for our next 2 eighth notes, you get 4 and. Let's move on to our fourth line here. On this line, we have half rests as well. Remember, for the half rests, get 2 beats each. So for our first 4 eighth notes, we write 1 and 2 and. We have 2 beats left, and we have a half rest, which is perfect. So we write 3 and 4 and. This next one starts with a half rest. So a half rest gets 2 beats, so we write in our 1 and 2 and then we have 4 eighth notes, so we write in 3 and 4 and. Our next exercise here has a half note, 2 eighth notes, and then a quarter note. For our half note, it gets 2 beats, so we write 1 and 2 and. Then our eighth notes, one gets a 3, the other gets the and the quarter note at the end gets 4 and. Our next one are 4 eighth notes and then a half note. So under our eighth notes, they each get 1 and 2 and. Now a half note gets 2 beats, so we write in 3 and 4 and. That's 2 beats right there, 3 and 4. Our next exercise starts with a half note, and then there are 4 quarter notes. The half note gets 2 beats, so we write in 1 and 2 and then our quarter notes, each of them gets a number or an and sign. So we have 3 and 4 and. All right, on to our last exercise. We have a half note, a quarter note, and 2 eighth notes. For our half note, it gets 2 beats, so we go 1 and 2 and. Our quarter note gets 3 and then our eighth notes get a 4 and an and. And we have finished the Counting Rhythms number 3 worksheet.